News Center 10 with Bill Close and Elise Wolfman, Ed Phillips, and Tim Healy.
And this evening...
Well, it's very tragic. You know, it was a real shock to us.
Lawmen investigate a fire that led to the deaths of 2 Arabian show horses worth more than $500,000. Fearsome, often fatal. This evening, a special Health Watch report on strokes.
He walked over to me and sat on the arm of the couch and just wouldn't talk to us.
And I says, I can't talk. I can't talk.
But Ed Watson has regained some speech. We'll hear more on his recovery. And on the Arizona road...
Just pure fun.
News Center 10 is next.
Good evening. Phoenix police say they have received 2 more complaints of sexual abuse at a daycare center which was closed last Friday. Police say the complaints involve 3 girls, ages 2 and 3 years old. State officials closed the Simon Says daycare center after an alleged sexual abuse incident involving a 3-year-old girl. Police say they received the new complaints this weekend. They have not yet pressed charges.
This is a very, very difficult situation, primarily because you have no independent witnesses. You have to rely on physical evidence. But to specifically say that one individual did it, at this point, we have the words of 2- and 3-year-old children against those of an adult.
The girls have been given physical tests. Police say they expect results within a day. One of the children says she was abused last week. The other 2 could not say when the incidents happened.
A Valley man is in critical condition, another dead after a shootout involving police. Officers say that Dennis Keith was pointing a gun at Jesus Robles outside this Phoenix bar. 3 police officers arrived on the scene, ordered him to drop it. Keith then allegedly shot and killed Robles, and Officer Mark Green fired on Keith, critically wounding him. A 3rd man, Sterling Worley, then came on the scene. Officers say he picked up the gun and ran. When ordered to stop, Worley allegedly pointed the weapon at the police. An officer shot and wounded him slightly. Worley is being held on assault charges. Keith has not yet been charged. Sheriff's investigators are attempting to find out what started a fire at the All-Arabian Horse Show near Scottsdale this morning. John Kane reports the fire killed 1 horse and indirectly led to the death of another.
It didn't look like much of a fire, just a few blackened stalls in a portable barn that housed competitors in the All-Arabian Horse Show. But it turned out to be a fire that cost at least $600,000 because 2 thoroughbred Arabians, like this one, were killed.
It's very tragic. You know, it was a real shock to us.
Jim Gaskill is the manager of the Georgia breeding farm that owned the horses, a yearling colt worth $75,000 and a 7-year-old mare worth $500,000. The mare was killed in an explosion after a worker sleeping in the barn woke up and saw the curtains on fire.
He was able to get out of bed, and in the interim, the curtains fell over the propane heater and an auxiliary tank that was in there. And the heat of the curtains being over it, suffocating it, caused the auxiliary tank to explode. When that happened, it just turned into an inferno.
We were just everybody was trying to locate horses. They were trying to get them out of the barn from the fire.
In the confusion, frightened horses were running loose. The main gate was open to let fire trucks in, and the colt ran out the gate and onto Bell Road.
So one of the horses that was released got out onto the roadway and ran eastbound on Bell Road, where it was struck by a vehicle in the roadway, and it was put to sleep by the veterinarian who belongs to the association here.
The driver of the car suffered minor injuries. The horses were insured, but said one breeder, with animals like these, the insurance cannot completely cover the loss. John Kane, News Center 10.
A Luke Air Force Base pilot is out of the hospital after bailing out of his F-16 jet fighter this morning. Base officials say Captain David Graham reported that the jet was losing thrust and he parachuted to the ground. The plane went down northwest of Gila Bend. The cause of the crash is still being investigated.
It's a disease many people dread, and coming up we'll begin a special Health Watch report on strokes.
It can hit anyone, anytime, and sometimes without warning. Tonight, you'll meet this man who is still trying to recover 2 years after stroke. I'm Susan Taylor, and I'll have a special report coming up next.
There's a good feeling in general, a feeling of pride, a celebration of moments that say you've arrived. So come on and celebrate, toast a winning combination. Now it's time to make your move in the general direction.
Now that you're moving ahead in life, make the best move of all to General Homes.
Move in the general direction.
When the bell rings, school breaks.
When the bell rings, the fever breaks.
The fever breaks.
The fever of the flavor of a Pringles.
There's a golden rule when you break out of school. With a can of Pringles, you're a fan of Pringles.
It's a deep fried taste. It's a crispy crunch.
Now, I get the peeps for the flavor of a Pringles.
Love the deep fried taste, love the crispy crunch. So break now for Pringles, you'll love the bunch.
You'll get the fever for the flavor of a Pringles.
Wait till you taste Pringles now.
With Mountain Bell's call waiting and call forwarding, Donna Roberts will never miss another call. When her son's on the line and her boss calls for her to teach a class, she'll get that call. When her sister calls because she's in town just for the day, she'll even get that call. Later, when her son needs a ride to Little League, she'll get that call. And when her Aunt Phyllis calls at a bad time, she can always say she's got her hands full. Get call waiting and call forwarding, only from Mountain Bell.
If you'd like to explore a fresh idea at lunch, discover a home-style sandwich bonanza. Hearty char-broiled sandwiches made with the freshest ingredients and served on whole wheat buns. The bacon...
Years after he suffered a stroke, is still struggling to recover. Today, Ed Watson is the supervisor of this Safeway salvage warehouse. He has 3 men working under him, which is a far cry from where he was almost 2 years ago. Then, he was a manager and had many workers under his supervision. But in April of 1983, Ed Watson had a stroke.
He was working with some dumbbells, and he just picked them up and placed them back down on the floor and walked over to me and sat on the arm of the couch and just wouldn't talk to us.
And I says, I can't talk. I can't talk.
What had happened was a clot had blocked the flow of one of the main arteries supplying blood to the brain. Without that blood, there is no oxygen, and without oxygen, brain cells become damaged. In fact, after 4 to 10 minutes without oxygen, those cells start to die. The damaged artery was on the left side of his brain, which affects the right side of the body. Initially, there was total paralysis of his right side, making him feel as though his body had been cut in two. But worse, he suffered aphasia, a condition that robbed him of his use of language.
Ed was always a marvelous conversationalist, could soothe feathers that were ruffled, was really the equalizer in the home.
It's in the back of your tongue, but you just get out to the bottom.
As his physical condition improved, he regained some use of his right arm and leg, but his vocabulary was extremely limited. One word he could say was yes, and that's what he said when his doctor, Philip Carter, suggested an operation to bypass the bad artery and provide damaged brain cells with more blood.
He did make some increased improvement, and he actually has gotten back a fair amount of speech.
The truck hit a lawnmower.
He continues speech therapy as well as physical therapy. With most stroke victims, the most significant improvements are accomplished in the first 6 months to a year. This may be as good as Ed will ever get, but he hopes not, and he says he thinks he's still getting better.
It's over and over, and every day it's go over and over, and then see, oh, I get it, I get it, I get it, and I'm go on with another word.
Is that a good feeling?
Yes. Oh God, it's a wonderful feeling.
What's marvelous is to see the recovery, and when you start getting really down and frustrated, if you look back and think back, which Ed always tells me to do when I get frustrated, is think where I was 6 months ago, or this type of thing.
You can't look back. Look ahead. Little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit.
We are told there are 2 things Ed Watson really has going for him. One is his fantastic attitude and the family support. The other, that his company let him keep his job. Both are credited with giving him a big boost psychologically. We've put together an information booklet on strokes, and if you'd like one, just send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Strokes, KTSP TV, 511 West Adams, Phoenix, 85003. And tomorrow night we'll tell you what causes stroke and some surgery now being done, Elise, to help prevent stroke.
Thank you, Susan.
Coming up, our warmest weather of the year so far.
Our special Health Watch report on stroke. One way doctors can try to prevent the dreaded disease. We'll tell you more coming up on News Center 10.
And with Bill Close and Elise Wolfman, Ed Phillips, and Tim Healy.
And this evening,
I think with the opportunity of a fair trial, we would have been able to be proven innocent.
2 Catholic nuns will not go to court charged with running an underground railroad for illegal aliens. In our special report on strokes, target of attack, we'll take you into the operating room. Surgery is one way to prevent strokes, but there are other treatments. And in our Child Watch report, a new message for school children. The latest coming up on News Center 10.
Good evening. A federal judge in Phoenix this morning dismissed all charges against 2 Catholic nuns accused of smuggling illegal aliens. The nuns are part of the sanctuary movement. And as John Kane reports, they said the reasons for the dismissal were the wrong reasons.
Sanctuary supporters sang hymns on the courthouse steps, but it wasn't divine intervention that allowed Sisters Anna Priester and Mary Waddell to walk away from all charges of smuggling illegal aliens. Judge Earl Carroll dismissed the charges at the request of prosecutors, who said Priester is ill and Waddell must care for her, so neither woman should stand trial. But Priester said that even though she has Hodgkin's disease, she is recovering and does not need Waddell to be her nurse. Their attorneys said prosecutors were just looking for a way out.
And they saw they'd made a terrible mistake, and rather than have a jury see that, they chose to indict them. Their stated reasons, of course, were her health, but I really think it was something beyond that.
The nuns admit helping people from Central America resettle in the United States. The government calls these people illegal aliens. The sanctuary calls them political refugees.
I think with the opportunity of a fair trial, we would have been able to be proven innocent. There are other people who have serious health problems, and hopefully those people will be dropped also.
A dozen other sanctuary members remain under indictment, and there's been no indication from the U.S. Attorney's Office that any more charges will be dropped. At the federal courthouse, John Kane, News Center 10.
Another woman accused in the sanctuary case pleaded guilty this afternoon to a misdemeanor. She will be sentenced next month.
Yesterday, we told you about 2 new complaints of sexual abuse that had been brought against Simon Says. That's a daycare center in East Phoenix. Well, police report today that one of those abuse cases has been found to have been of a physical nature, not a sexual one, and that it may not be related to the daycare center at all. Second case is still being investigated. Meanwhile, Department of Health Services officials continue their initial investigation into allegations of sexual abuse of a 3.5-year-old girl at the daycare center. Those allegations prompted DHS to close Simon Says last Friday. Health officials say that the center's record of numerous violations and complaints in 1984 contributed to their decision to suspend its license.
That this center had numerous violations in the past and had a number of other complaints involving physical abuse were helpful to us, but the key determination here was based with respect to that 3.5-year-old child.
Dr. Novick says that over the next 2 days, he will be reviewing evidence relating to the Simon Says case.
The murder trial of Donald Beatty was scheduled to resume today, but it was postponed because the defense attorney came down with laryngitis. Beatty is accused in the sex slaying of 13-year-old Christy Fornoff of Tempe. His trial is expected to continue tomorrow.
This evening in our Missing Child Watch news of a new campaign for children and a search that begins in Phoenix. Deborah Pyburn has more on that.
Well, Bill, tonight our Child Watch search focuses on a child missing from right here in our own city. Maurice Dwayne Strikeleather was taken from his home on West Washington January 31st. It is believed this boy was taken by his non-custodial father. The boy is 7 years old, he is about 4 foot 4 inches tall, and he weighs about 65 pounds. He has a light complexion and freckles on his nose. To report any information about Maurice's disappearance, contact the Phoenix Police Department at 262-6141. Also, a few weeks ago, we told you about the campaign to find missing children, and it was moving to milk cartons. The photos of missing children are being printed on half-gallon milk cartons, and now that campaign is going a step farther. Today in Washington, entertainer Rita Moreno joined officials at the National Child Safety Council introducing Safety Pup. This character was created to teach children about safety. His picture will be appearing on 8-ounce milk cartons, the kind that are served in our schools. The half-pint cartons will also have tips for children on how to avoid abduction.
If even one child is found due to this program, we will consider it well worth its efforts.
Who among us, in desperate need to read something, anything at breakfast, hasn't turned to the deathless prose of a cereal box or a milk carton?
The new school milk carton campaign is being paid for by milk carton manufacturers. And one more missing child note. It deals with the Atlanta child murders, the CBS drama which concludes tonight on TV 10. Among those who have watched the movie closely are people like Serlena Cobb. Her son Christopher was among the more than 24 victims in that brutal string of killings. And despite the conviction of Wayne Williams, she and some other mothers of victims still live with doubt.
Wayne Williams called me the morning of his last press conference out on Jefferson Street, and he spoke to me. He told me that he didn't kill my son and that he had information that could bring the people that did it to justice.
My child just left here, and I don't know what happened to him. It's just a loss, a big loss in my life. But I don't know why.
Tonight on News Center, 10 p.m., following this movie, we will hear more from the mothers who still live with the nightmares of real Atlanta child murders. Bill, we'll have that at 10.
Thank you, Deborah. Elise?
Up next, preventing a stroke. See how doctors are using surgery against the disabling and often fatal disease as we continue a special Health Watch report on stroke next on the news.
Experience a community full of choices at Scottsdale Ranch. Enjoy sailing and fishing on Lake Serena, swimming or tennis in many neighborhoods. This 1,100-acre master plan community has the exquisite answer to your individual taste. From condominiums to single-family homes with lake or mountain views, like Las Brisas, a garden home community by Edmonds & Associates and Felker Development. Visit Scottsdale Ranch today, the community of choice. Shea Boulevard at 100th Street.
It takes getting up early ahead of the rest. It takes moving faster and being the best. It takes tough-minded people exactly like you. It takes planning ahead to keep coming through. You gotta be tough to go that extra mile. So we gotta be tough to make you smile.
Who's going to get you where you're going? We are. Who's going to get you home? PSA.
To make you smile, we know we gotta be tough. When it's a matter of pride, enough is never enough. We know what it takes to go that extra mile. So we gotta be tough to make you
Save on everything for outdoor fix-up.
You can do it.
Check our circular in Sunday's paper.
Pay less cash ways.
It's time to save on 6-foot wide grass turf carpet, now just 99 cents a linear foot. Half whiskey barrel planters for your patio or deck are now only $7.99 each. And Owens Corning Class A rated fiberglass shingles are just $21.88 a square in assorted colors. Look for these savings and more in our outdoor savings circular. Come and save now at Payless Cashways.
Don't do it yourself without us.
Payless Cashways.
Every year, almost 500,000 Americans suffer stroke, which can be fatal. And for some of those who survive, there can be disabling effects. This evening, as we continue our special Health Watch report on stroke, target of attack, Susan Taylor looks at how strokes can be prevented with surgery.
Doctors will tell you, Elise, there is no cure for stroke. The only real hope to survive a stroke or avoid its crippling effects is prevention. And in some cases, after careful examination, doctors can predict the potential for a stroke before it happens. Tonight, we will show you some of the surgeries being used today to help prevent stroke. But we must warn you, though, some of the scenes are very graphic. We begin first by finding out exactly what is a stroke.
Well, basically a stroke is damage to the brain that occurs when it doesn't get enough blood. The artery comes up, there's quite severe narrowing, and
There are several ways a stroke can occur. One of the most common is a clot that blocks one of the 4 arteries supplying blood to the brain. Blood carries oxygen and other nutrients, and without those, brain cells become damaged and could die. The other common cause of stroke is a cerebral hemorrhage, where the blood vessel actually bursts and floods the brain with blood. One cause of this might be hypertension or high blood pressure. But whatever the actual reason for the stroke, the results can be devastating. It's the number 3 killer of Americans, but some say that isn't always the worst of it.
Stroke can result in the inability to talk or to communicate, inability to read, inability to use one arm or the other side, be paralyzed.
Ready with the timer. Blood pressure okay, Peter?
When arteries become partially blocked, surgery is one measure sometimes used to stop a major stroke from happening.
By going in there surgically, we can remove this hardening of the arteries or arteriosclerotic plaque that is built up, and it prevents further flow turbulence and further clumping of blood, and it has been shown to reduce the risk of subsequent strokes.
But sometimes the artery can be completely blocked or permanently damaged. In that case, another type of surgery could be required: bypass surgery.
We've already opened the scalp, and here's that little artery.
An artery located outside the skull becomes the donor vessel. A hole just slightly bigger than a dime is drilled, the bone removed, and the brain exposed. Dr. Robert Spetzler is the neurosurgeon operating here.
Right here you have a mini system of what the brain really depends on: the arteries that bring the blood and the veins that take it away.
While the new artery is being sewn in place, blood flow is halted. To prevent permanent brain damage and to give the surgery team time to complete the operation, the brain itself is put to sleep.
Irrigation, regular.
Clamps are removed, and the blood begins to flow through the new artery. The operation at this point is considered a success. This patient's chances for suffering a stroke have been considerably reduced. There are other things doctors can do to try and prevent strokes. Treatment's not as drastic as surgery. One is to prescribe a drug that acts as a blood thinner so blood flows more easily through the arteries. But sometimes there is no way to prevent a stroke, and for most that means a long hospital stay. Tomorrow night we'll show you just what it means to try and recover from a stroke. Now, if you would like more information on the subject of stroke, send for one of our brochures. Just mail a stamped, self-addressed envelope to Strokes, New Center 10, 511 West Adams, Phoenix, 85003. And Elise, we'll see tomorrow night that strokes not only affect the victim, but the families as well. And it's an effort on everybody's part in an entire...
That dreaded attack. This evening, as we continue a special Health Watch report, Stroke, Target of Attack. Susan Taylor looks at the patient's long road to recovery.
That's right, Elise. Recovering from a stroke can mean weeks, even months of being in the hospital. And after that follows more months, perhaps years of special therapy to regain speaking skills or even the use of an arm or leg. Many hospitals provide rehabilitation teams to help stroke victims. And tonight we take you to one right here in the Valley, where the treatment of stroke patients is approached a little bit differently.
Don't go so fast, just take your time.
John Schramm was living in Lake Havasu City when he had his stroke. He was flown to St. Joseph's Hospital and Medical Center for treatment.
Push. Good, John. Keep pushing. Keep pushing.
These sessions with a physical therapist are among his last exercises here in the hospital. He's just about ready to go home. And the road John has taken to get this far has been a long, tedious one.
Give me a big cough.
He started here in the intensive care unit for stroke victims at the Barrow Neurological Institute at St. Joseph's. This is the only one of its kind in the Southwest, with rooms, equipment, and specially trained medical staff all situated in one area dedicated to working with the stroke patient.
Yeah, you're gonna feel poke.
Continuous nursing is required here, along with the knowledge of all the necessary technical equipment. Stroke is a very complicated disease, and the victims of that disease require very special care, care that isn't always pleasant to give.
They're disabled, they're confused sometimes, and yet they may have a great potential for recovery. As bad as they may look when they come in, they often do recover very nicely. Sometimes the dismal outlook that you think is there changes quite abruptly, and nurses have to be aware of this.
When a patient recovers from a stroke, it may take a little bit longer, but when we see the progress, we're very pleased with that, and we feel good about being able to help the patient through that progression.
Is crying easy? Is that a sign of a stroke too? Or one of the results of it?
It isn't only the patient who suffers from this disease. Family members are also very involved, and experts tell us that the support the family gives is vital. When patients recover enough to need less nursing, they are moved to a step-down area, rooms with less technical equipment.
See how strong your hands are.
And from here to rehabilitation.
Okay, come forward and bring that.
Occupational therapy teaches ways to do everyday activities. Ben Broughton is learning the best approach for him to get in and out of a bathtub.
Beautiful.
Even more intense is the physical therapy, as John Schramm found out. Stroke can leave a weakness or even paralysis of a patient's limbs, and therapy like this MAT class helped to strengthen recovering muscles.
We're going back to Pennsylvania, and we're going to, he'll be going to rehab every day there.
Your knees are in there.
Yeah.
Family support is very important. John's wife, Marie, comes to his therapy sessions each day.
Because if I didn't come, I wouldn't know what he was doing, and I wouldn't know how to help to take care of him.
In addition to the psychological and physical problems, a stroke victim can also, or stroke victims that is, can also have their speech affected. For instance, they may know what they want to express, but they are unable to say the words. So along with all the other treatments, stroke victims may need the help of speech therapy to try and regain language skills. Here at News Center 10, we've put together an information booklet on strokes. If you would like a copy, just send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Stroke, News Center 10, 511 West Adams, Phoenix, 85003. Now, one common misconception about stroke is that it happens only to the elderly. Tomorrow night, you will find out that is not true, and you will meet a woman who had a stroke at the age of 28. And I think that's one of the scariest aspects. It can hit anyone.
Killer disease that can also disable. Most people think stroke happens only to the elderly. That is not always true, as Health Watch reporter Susan Taylor tells us as we continue a special report, Stroke, Target of Attack.
Stroke is a disease which doesn't pay any attention to age. It can strike anyone at any age, and you'll find that out tonight when you meet a young woman who thought her age made her an unlikely candidate for a stroke. Carrie Katz is a secretary, and her normal typing speed is 80 words per minute. That changed less than 2 months ago. On Christmas, Terry, age 28, suffered a stroke.
I never thought it would happen to me. You know, I always thought that older people got strokes, and I'm a healthy person. I do constantly doing things and going here, going there.
Her doctors told her it was a combination of birth control pills and smoking that caused her stroke. A series of emboli, which are wandering blood clots, found their way to one of the arteries, which supplies oxygen-rich blood to the brain.
I was very confused. I didn't even know enough to dial the operator to call for an ambulance. I knew something was wrong, but mostly the speech. I never looked at my face to see that I was drooping on the right side. And
fortunately for Terry, her roommate returned to town a day early and phoned her. Terry, by that time, knew she'd suffered a stroke, and she was rushed to an emergency room.
But this is a lot better for...
She was lucky. Her hospital stay was only 10 days, and with therapy, such as squeezing silly putty to help strengthen her hand, and exercises to help bring back the muscles in her face, Terry is improving daily. Terry Katz is just one example that strokes can happen to anyone. It is not just an old person's disease. In fact, almost 20% of all the people suffering from strokes are under the age of 65. Taking birth control pills and smoking were two things that put Terry in the high-risk category, with smoking the much greater danger, and there are several others. Hardening of the arteries is a common risk factor, just as it is for heart disease. So is obesity, hypertension or high blood pressure, a lack of physical exercise, stress. Diabetics are a high-risk group, and having a high cholesterol level in the blood is bad. And perhaps the highest risk factor, heredity. There's not much you can do about heredity, but most of the other risk factors can be controlled to some degree. It means a change in lifestyle, but the good news, the changes work. Experts tell us that regular exercise, a better diet, keeping the blood pressure under control, and a decrease in cigarette smoking all pay off. Such efforts decrease the number of victims not only of heart disease, but also of stroke.
I've had enough experience in emergency medicine to know the symptoms of a stroke, and it's just something I knew, but I couldn't believe I'm so young.
The doctors we talked to said the most important thing you can do to try to prevent stroke is to know the warning signals. Now, that's not always easy to do because sometimes those signals are very subtle. But some of the important signs to watch out for are a numbness, tingling, or temporary paralysis of the face or an arm and leg, a sudden temporary visual problem like blurring or even blindness, an unexplained headache, dizziness, a feeling of confusion, and an inability to understand what's being said or finding your words jumbled or slurred when you try to speak. These warning signals could mean a person is having a series of little strokes, and that could mean a major stroke is about to happen. If you experience any of these warning signals, let your doctor know immediately or go to an emergency room.
Susan, will every single person experience any one of those symptoms?
No, not necessarily will you get any warning signals with stroke, and that's one of the scary things. We were told only about 20 to 30% of all stroke victims have any type of warning. Now, tomorrow night, Elise, we'll take a look at some support groups, which are very important. Not only
target of attack, Health Watch reporter Susan Taylor and producer Bonnie Leviton have told us how this dreaded disease can strike anyone. It is not always fatal. It is often disabling. And this evening, Susan Taylor tells us what helps some victims return to living a near normal life.
Well, family support is one of the most important aspects of a stroke victim's recovery. Tonight, we look at another source of support and what it's meant to a woman who has been trying to overcome the effects of a stroke that hit her more than 10 years ago. Mary Ann Phelan has limited use in her left arm and leg, so she just works around them. 11 years after suffering a stroke caused by a brain hemorrhage, she says she's come a long way.
I couldn't talk, except I could say words, not sentences. And my left side wasn't moving at all. And the first sign I knew I could move was my big toe.
Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy...
One thing that motivated Mary Ann's improvements, 4 active children. At that time, they ranged in ages from 6 down to the infant, Mary Kate.
They can't remember me as mobile, free-speaking, And so I know that's their normal mom.
When she first returned home, she often found herself in a reverse role with the children, like the time her oldest son, Michael, was in kindergarten.
I've asked him to tie my shoes every morning, and when he said, again? And I said, Michael, I've tied your shoes for 5 years. Now, please tie my, and he didn't say it again.
Why don't you wait till tomorrow?
Her husband, Tom, is a civil engineer and says the first reaction many people had to his wife's stroke was that he would leave her.
I would say after that, the toughest thing then was raising the children. That was probably in the long run a blessing, though, because we just had to spend so much energy with the children that we couldn't think of ourselves.
So I think it should be put on the agenda for the directors' meeting.
Mary Ann is a member of the Scottsdale Stroke Club. It's a support group for victims of the disease and their families. Everyone here has been through the frustration and sorrow of what stroke can do.
You see group process. They had weaknesses, and they've learned how to handle it. And you know that when it happens to you, you don't know. As a nurse, I thought I knew all or many things about strokes, and I laugh at myself.
There are many stroke clubs and support groups for stroke victims and their families. To find out what's available near you, we suggest you call a local hospital. Also, if you would like to know more about stroke, we have a brochure that we've put together. If you'd like one, just send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Stroke, News Center 10, 511 West Adams, Phoenix 85003. And Elise, Bonnie Leverton, and I would like to thank all those people at St. Joseph's Hospital and Medical Center, even the patients there who helped us put together this stroke series. We hope people have learned a little bit more.
Interesting, it's frightening, but it's better to know.
It is.
Thank you, Susan.
Have plenty to say about it.
A motorcycle gang whose name strikes fear in many people's heart feel they're not getting a fair deal. We'll tell you their story.
And a small but important celebration for a woman who is over a mere century old.
All that plus Ken Adelson with the sports and Leslie Mihara's weather, next on the Eyewitness News Weekend Report.
Now through the end of March, Denny's Southern breakfasts are at special prices. Chicken fried steak with country gravy served with eggs and grits. Warm buttermilk biscuits and juicy sausage patties. A biscuit with...
You're watching Arizona's own KTVK TV3. Frank Camacho, Heidi Fogelsong, Ken Adelson Sports, and Leslie Mihata Weather. Now on Eyewitness News.
Good evening, everyone. 3 of Arizona border stations into Mexico remain closed tonight. They're among 9 U.S. border crossings that were shut down last night by federal immigration officials. The action follows recent threats that Mexican drug dealers plan to raid border stations and kill U.S. officials. Leslie Miller has more on the latest.
time you call, we make a fresh pizza just for you. Free delivery to your door in 30 minutes or less, guaranteed.
Domino's Pizza delivers. Domino's Pizza delivers. Domino's Pizza.
8 years ago, a young Arizona family opened what was to become, because of its prices, the most controversial furniture store in the Southwest. Well, folks, the Big Tin Shed has not only survived that controversy, but has evolved, in our opinion, as the most prestigious furniture establishment in the Valley. Our prices on the most impressive parade of brand names under one roof remain the lowest year-round. So, folks, make that trip to the Shed. It's worth it to you. The Shed, 5855 North 51st Avenue in Glendale.
Presenting Showtime Cable TV.
We make excitement. Showtime excitement. You're gonna see TV with some real excitement. We make excitement. Showtime excitement. Applause, it should not be caught. We make excitement.
A thrill a minute awaits you at Arizona Downs every Wednesday through Sunday. Thoroughbred racing at its finest. Cash in on the action as your favorite thunders down the home stretch. Excitement from start to finish, Wednesday through Sunday at Arizona Downs, 19th Avenue and Bell Road at Turf Paradise. First post, 1 p.m.
Your last chance for Monday racing this Monday, March 4th. Free general admission plus $1 wagers.
Murray Hayden, the 58-year-old artificial heart recipient, is awake and alert tonight after undergoing emergency surgery yesterday. The surgery was to stop bleeding in Hayden's chest, caused by the removal of small catheters designed to monitor his blood pressure. Doctors were able to stop the flow of blood without creating further complications. Complications from a stroke can affect a person for life. The victim faces possible paralysis, speech impairment, and even the threat of death. Tonight we look at the victim's long road to recovery and profile one Valley man who's made an incredible comeback. 2 years ago, Ed Watson was leading a very active life. He played golf and racquetball on a regular basis, had a challenging job, and a good home life. Then he suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed.
A perfect time was in acquiring the use of words. I couldn't believe I was lost all that.
To see it, to witness everything that's happening, to have to virtually know that you cannot help. There's nothing you can do to help him. It's something he has to go through on his own.
It's been a trying time for Ed and his family, but with the help of emotional support from his wife and friends, along with a lot of determination, Ed has made a strong comeback. He is walking, talking, and even working again. He's also helping others by heading up a support group for stroke victims and their families.
We can all get together and people realize, hey, it's not just me. It's not just our family going through it. There are other people down here with the same kind of problems.
Medical experts say while many strokes occur unexpectedly, sometimes warning signs can be detected before a stroke strikes. They include a numbness or weakness of the face, arm, or leg, loss of speech, double vision, and unexplained headaches. If you notice one or more of these signs, make sure to check it out with your doctor. Frank?
A deadly earthquake has hit Chile. That story tops our Dateline News tonight. So far, the death toll has reached 82. Over 1,000 others have been injured. The quake shook the major city of Santiago for about 5 minutes, crumbling buildings and sending thousands of people into the streets. Power and phone service were knocked out along an 800-mile-long stretch. Officials are expecting the number of dead and injured to increase as rescue crews search for missing people.